Augustine, the early church father Augustine one time said, "What is time? I know, as long as I don't have to tell you." Right? As soon as you try and, talk about what time is, it's very elusive, right? I look at my watch and I tell you what time it is. But I don't know if you've ever even considered it. What are you actually doing when you do that? You may or may not realize this, but people have not always viewed time the same. Now, in a sense, telling time is no new. From the sun and the stars and the moon, for millennia, people have used different temporal scales, but different cultures and different historical moments have understood and organized time in different ways. For example, ancient Israel would measure a day from morning to morning. They would measure a day. But you may not know it, they also divided the day even more than that. They would talk about the breeze before sunrise, the evening breeze, or the hottest time of the day. But I want you to understand that in that instant
Check, 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 check.
But in all of these things, your daily experience of time is shaped by your environment. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip a bunch.
Video, he actually is discussing how we relate to time and how, like the way we relate to time isn't the way people have always related to time. Like people have thought about time very differently, and it's only been in the last, 700 years or so that people have actually really used watches and clocks and been kind of separated from the rhythms of life when they are working. Like we can start at 11 o'clock at night working on a project and just turn on a light and do it then, even though, throughout history, people could never do that. And so we can kind of separate ourselves from the reality of our existence in a way that people never could before. And part of that causes us to feel like it's possible for us to do more than is probably good for us to be doing. So in the talk, he talks about stress and about how when we're trying to like do more than we can actually do. It's usually not because we can't get everything done that we need to get done. It's because we feel like we can't get everything done that we need to get done. And we're like perceiving things in a way that isn't like really in line with reality. I'm not summarizing it very well, but if you want to throw anything in, if you feel like you can.
Yeah, I'll see if I can talk about coffee here. This is the book, You're Only Human. Kelly Kapik is a professor at Covenant College. He's also a ruling elder up at Lookout Mountain Presbyterian Church. Oh, thank you. And this is really one of the best books I read in 2023. I think when this book came out, and the subtitle is "How Your Limits Reflect God's Design and Why That's Good News." And so what he's talking about in this book is finitude. We are finite creatures. We are creatures with limited capacity. And he said it's when we forget that, when we relegate that, when we choose not to keep it in the forefront of our minds, we end up with a distorted relationship to time that is marked by what he would call secular anxiety. And the secular part is the part that doesn't consciously deny the existence of God, but it is a denial, a functional denial of God's active presence in the world, right? And anxiety, he said, is a reflection of that distorted secular relationship to time, where we're not thinking about ourselves as God's creatures, created to do the good works that he has prepared for us to do, but we think of ourselves as in control and as having to get these things done if good is going to be accomplished in the world. And so we put ourselves in the place of the creator rather than the creature. And he said, when you do that, in the anxiety that is so common in our day is compounded and almost inevitable, because we feel this pressure to get things done. He says, but when we remember that we're creatures created by God with limits, think about the limits that you have. One of the limits that you have is that you need to sleep, right? This is just reality. God created you to need to sleep 1/3 of your life. That's unbelievably inefficient and frustrating. How many of you have ever been frustrated by this reality, right? And how often have you ever thought that you're gonna try to get around it, or you're gonna try to bypass it, and the only thing that ends up happening is you end up running into the rocks of reality and shipwrecking your life, right? You're shipwrecking your health or shipwrecking your mental state. You can't function without sleep. But not only do you need sleep, you also need downtime where you're awake, right? You need time that's where you're not producing. God's created you this way. So the 2/3 of your day where you are awake, you can't be always on. He says, but that's one of the realities that our modern society tries to bypass with laptops and phones and all these things, where it's not that you're actually, he says the statistics show that people today are not actually working more than people worked 50 or 100 years ago. Everybody feels like they are, but they're not. He says, but the difference is that they're never off. And so they never feel like they have a break, because they can always do work at 11 o'clock at night in their kitchen. Or they can pull out their phone and answer an email, or they can do this, or they can do that. And so the rhythms of embodied existence have been broken, all right? And because of that, we feel like we're always on, and we feel like we are always working, and we feel like we never get to recharge. He says, but it's not just that you need sleep and rest or downtime. You also need things like love and like laughter. God has created us for these things, and he said love and laughter are unbelievably inefficient. You cannot schedule them. You cannot just work them into a time blocked schedule and make sure, well, I'm going to get my love from 11 to 11:30 tonight, and then I'll be good, right? It just doesn't work that way. You actually have to live an embodied relationship. And so the thing that Capek is trying to get us to recognize in this book and in this talk is the reality of embodied existence and the reality of the limits that come with that we are finite creatures with limited capacity who have needs for things like love and laughter and rest and sleep and food. And he says, what we need to recognize in all of this is that the meaning and the fulfillment that we long for is found not in the modern secular world's understanding of efficiency and of getting more things done, because that's where most of us fall, right? Most of us have this underlying sense of vague guilt that we're not doing enough, right? We're not living lives worthy of our calling. That's the language we've been using in Ephesians, right? And we've got this vague sense that we're not doing enough to actually justify that. We're not doing enough to actually live up to that. We're not doing enough to live a life worthy of the name of our Lord. We're not doing enough to live up to the calling that we have received. And what's the solution? Well, the solution is to make better use of our time, to invest it more wisely, all right, to be more efficient. And, I fall prey to that as much as anybody else. I can't tell you how many books I have on my shelves about productivity and better use of time and efficiency and how to do that. And we all have this sense that if I was just a little better, I could do more. And then I would be a better follower of Jesus Christ. And he's saying, laziness is a real thing. Sloth is one of the 7 deadly sins. That is a real thing. But so often, our guilt on not doing more has nothing to do with truth and everything to do with the lies of the devil and the lies of our secular age. And the lies that your worth and your value are found in playing God's part rather than playing the creature's part. And so what he wants us to see, and what he wants us to begin to recognize is the good news of our limits, the good news of our limitations. Because what do the good news of our limitations say? The good news of our limitations say that if we will do today the good works that he has prepared for us to do with the resources that he has provided, it's enough. Right? And think about that. When have you felt that? When have you felt that at the end of the day, you can lay your head on your pillow and say, it was enough? All right? Most of the time, if you're like me, and I think most of you probably are, you get to the end of the day and you are acutely aware of what you didn't finish. You get to the end of the day and you are acutely aware of what you didn't accomplish, of the things on the list that didn't get done. Right? Now, every once in a while, you may have a day where you're like, oh yeah, this day went well. I got this done. And you feel really good. But that is waning, quickly evaporates in the failures of the following day and the failures of the following week. And by far, we have more days where we don't get done the things we want to get done than when we feel like, oh yes, I actually accomplished something today. And the question he asks, and he asks it to the students, he says, do you think God likes you at the end of the day? We all know, oh, God loves us. Yes, God loves you. But does God like you at the end of the day? Or is he just sort of frustrated with you and constantly disappointed and, constantly frustrated because you haven't done enough? He said, in our modern age, so many of us live with that disordered relationship to time that we call anxiety, that is rooted in the false belief that we have failed God because we haven't done everything. And he says that is idolatry. That is a failure to recognize that you are a creature created with limits. And he says when you begin to acknowledge that, when you begin to acknowledge that you are a creature created with limits, it actually sets you free. And I've pondered this a lot since I read this book, because it's one of those realities that I want to come back to again and again and again and again. The author of Ecclesiastes says it this way, that if you can find joy in the work that God's prepared for you to do today, that is a gift from him, right? And that's what we long for, right? As followers of Christ. We long to find joy in the work that he has prepared for us to do, right? It's not bad to have vision and plans and goals and all that. Those things serve their purpose. But they always have to be held loosely, acknowledging our finitude, acknowledging that we will do what he gives us the opportunity to do with the resources that he provides. And so again, this is the idea that I want to come back to again and again, that what you do, how you serve the Lord, how you love your neighbor, how you do good, all of that, right, is conditioned by the reality that you are a finite creature who is entirely dependent upon God for strength and resources and opportunity. And therefore, when we acknowledge him, then we can say, okay, it's enough to do today that which he has given me to do. And I can actually be content. With the good works that he gave me the opportunity to do today. And they will never be everything that I can imagine doing, everything that I want to do, everything that the world wants me to do, right? Because you are a finite creature. But the question is, how do I love well the people that God has woven into the fabric of my life today with the resources and the energy and the wisdom that he has given me today? And so just think for yourself for just a moment. think how you experience that disordered relationship with time that he's talking about, all right? Where do you feel that vague pressure of, I haven't done enough? Where do you feel that vague pressure of, well, if I was really a better person, I would have done this. If I was really a better person, I would have done that, right? Where do you feel that? Because I think a lot of us feel that. A lot of us feel that underlying guilt of not having done enough. And what he's coming at in this book is he says, listen, that guilt is a false guilt rooted in Satan's lie. A lie that denies that you are a creature, a finite creature with real limits, seeking to serve in the world. And so, again, think about how this works out. Loving your neighbor is often terribly inefficient. How many of you have experienced that, right? Dealing with people is actually incredibly messy. And because it is messy, we often try to come up with more efficient ways to show mercy, more efficient ways to show good to people in need, right? Because we want to touch as many people as possible in as short a time as possible, right? That's what we want, because the needs always outstrip what we're able to do. And we're like, well, if I just help this person, well, that leaves so many other people who I can't help. right? And so we need to be more efficient. We need to figure out ways to do more with less in less time, right? And that's the push. And one of the things that we've talked about here at Trinity over the years is that we don't actually want the most efficient mercy ministry possible. We don't want the ministry that is able to touch the most people the fastest with the least expenditure. That's not actually what we want to do, because that's not the way that human relationships actually work. And we've said it, we would rather go deep with a few people and really walk with them over the long haul than to lightly touch a few and not actually make change, right? And that's a very conscious decision that we've made. And it means that maybe your report at the end of the year, when you're saying, well, how many families did we touch? How many things did we do? It's not always as impressive as it could be. It's not always as impressive as some other organizations or some other ministries. But we're like, but that's okay, because we want to pour ourselves deeply into the opportunities that God has given us as a body. But that applies not only to our deacons, that applies to each of you individually as families as well. Each of you is called to love your neighbor, right? And the reality is that parenting your family, parenting your own children is terribly inefficient. It is just terribly inefficient. It requires, just astronomical amounts of time and energy. And for a lot of you, you can't even get done all the things you want to do on that front by the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you're tired and you're exhausted. And at the end, we need to learn to be able to say, okay, not, where do these expectations come from? As far as what I had to get done in order to be a good parent, in order to be, in order to love my children well, right? Where do those expectations come from? Do those expectations honor the reality of what it means to be a finite creature created with real limitations that are part of God's gift to me, right? They're a gift because they set you free from false guilt. Do what I've given you to do. Do what I've given you the opportunity to do today. And this is why we come back to the passage in Galatians 6. It's one of those passages I return to again and again. Because in Galatians 6, what does Paul say? He says, do not grow weary of doing good, right? Do not grow weary of doing good. Right? This is, recognizing your finitude is not excusing laziness. It's not excusing doing nothing. It's not excusing, just sort of taking a nap and forgetting about other people. He says, no, there's a call to do good, right? But it's do not grow weary in good, but as he gives you opportunity, today, do the good that he's prepared for you to do. Right? And that's the thing that Caput keeps bringing us back to again and again and again. And in the book, he tells the story. He says, I want to recount to you my experience of sitting in an adult Sunday school class at his church. He's an elder at Lookout Mountain Presbyterian Church, PCA Church up on Lookout Mountain. Great church. Love the pastors there. He says, I was sitting in Sunday school one day, and one of our missionaries comes and makes a presentation, and they talk about the need for financial support. He said, then a couple of weeks later, another ministry from the town is talking, and they need volunteers. And I'm like, oh man, this is really good work, And then another ministry comes a few weeks after that, and they are doing justice ministry for people subjected to trafficking. He's like, how can your heart not be moved by that, right? And then he says a few weeks later, someone else makes an appeal, and they're going over to Africa to train indigenous pastors working in the community, and they need volunteers to help kind of the logistics of running these classes that they're doing over there for the week. And he says it's just there's never an end to the need. He says my church can make me aware of something I'm not doing every Sunday. he said, it just becomes this crushing burden. And how many of you have ever felt that? How many of you have ever felt that? And the reason we feel that is because the reality is that the needs out there are greater than our capacity to meet them. Right? No matter how much of your time and energy and money you give, it will not be enough to meet the needs that are out there in the world. Can we acknowledge that? That's real, right? And that's a function of your finitude. Right? That's a function of your finitude. All right? And so it's not a failure. It's not a sin. It's part of God's design. He did not design you to be the fountain of life. He did not design you to be the source of every good thing. He designed you to be one creature in his body doing a myriad of good works, all right? To love others, to love neighbor, and bring blessing to bring blessing to others. Your job is to be the member of the body that God created you to be, not to be the whole body. And that's one of the realizations that I came to. He said, reflecting on Matthew 25, in Matthew 25, Jesus tells the story of the separation of the sheep and the goats. And the goats are separated because they saw the needs and they didn't respond. How many of you ever heard that story? How many of you have ever been crushed by that story? You're like, wait a second. There's all kinds of times when I see needs and I can't respond to them. And the assumption is, well, that we're failing. And so he says, how refreshing is it to know that you are actually part of a body that is visiting the sick, that is visiting the orphan, that is responding to the needs of the immigrant, that is responding to the needs of the fatherless. You may not be doing everything, but you were never intended to. You're just one member of the body. And there's other members of the body who are doing other things that you can't do. And they look at you and be like, oh, I wish I could do what they're doing, but I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the resources to do that. And we tend to look at the thing that we're doing and dismiss it as just not much, right? I can't tell you how often I'm looking around at different faces of people who I know serve in just, what to me seem miraculous ways. And when you comment to them about the things that they're doing, they're like, oh, that's nothing. Did you see what so-and-so did over there? That's the response I get all the time. And it's, in some ways, it's beautiful. But the reality is that it misses the point of the way that God has created us as finite creatures and the way he has created us as members of the body. And so again, it comes back to this reality of acknowledging that God is God in the good works that we seek to do on a daily basis, right? Who is it that God has woven into the fabric of your life for you to love? Who is that? Who is it that God has placed next to you? Who is it that God has put you in relationship with? Right? It may be terribly inefficient. Right? And you may be thinking, oh man, I'm spending all my time and I'm walking with this one person and the needs are so much greater. Maybe I've spent the last several years taking care of my mom as she enters the last stages of life, or maybe I've taken all this time and I'm caring for a child with special needs, or maybe it's a single mom who lives down the street, or maybe it's a neighbor who just has never felt the love of God in tangible form, and you've been positioned to be kind to them even in their meanness to you, right? And what Capek wants us to do, and what I want us to do, the reason I think this book is so great, is because it teaches us just simply to begin that process of recognizing that the limited things that we can do, the limited things that God has given us to do, are enough. Because he's God and we're not. We don't need to be God for the good works of his kingdom to be done on earth. We simply need to be the limited, finite creature he's created us to be, right? And so, it's God's design that you spend, half your waking hours at work, right? It's God's design that the bulk of the rest of your time is taken up with your own family. It's God's design that you have a limited capacity to come alongside of neighbors, and that you can't possibly meet all the needs that are out there. That's God's design, and that means it's okay. Right? What you are called to do is not be God. What you are called to do is not to do everything. What you are called to do is to, with generosity and joy, do the good works that he has prepared for you to do today, right? With the resources that he has provided. And that may or may not seem like enough to you. It may or may not seem impressive to the world, but it's the reality of what it means to be a finite creature of the King, right? And so embrace your finitude. Embrace the reality that you are limited. Do what he has provided you with the opportunity and the resources to do. Find joy in that, and then do it again tomorrow, right? And do not allow the lies of the world and the lies of Satan to crush you with a false guilt that says you haven't done enough, right? Because those are secular lies. Those are lies that deny that God is God and you are not, right? Embrace the reality that he's God, you're not. You only do what he gives you to do. And do today what he gives you to do, and rest. Do today what he gives you to do and say, that's enough, right? And if I have opportunity to do that tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. But today, this is what he's given me to do. This is what I'm going to give myself to. And this is enough. So if that hopefully whets your appetite, this is the book. He is a college professor, so it's not the easiest read in the world, but it's readable. It's accessible. And there's copies of it back on our bookcase. But again, you're only human. How your limits reflect God's design, and why that's good news. That's the name of the book. So will you close it up?